You know, every February 2nd, all eyes turn to this little town in Pennsylvania, just waiting for a groundhog to tell us about the weather. It's weird, it's wonderful, and it feels so American. But what if I told you this whole thing has its roots in ancient Celtic fire festivals and old European folklore? Yeah, let's dive into the surprising story hiding behind that famous shadow.
But first things first, we've got to get the big question out of the way. When Punxsutawney Phil comes out and the crowd goes absolutely nuts, is there any actual meteorological magic going on here? Or are we all just putting our faith in a rodent who happens to have a really great publicist?
Well, if you actually look at the data, like all the way back to the 1880s, Phil's all-time accuracy rate is it's a cozy 39%. So, not exactly what you'd call a sure thing, which honestly makes the whole tradition even more fascinating. If it's not about being right, then what is it about? To figure that out, we have to start with the modern spectacle we all know and love.
So let's start with what we see today. Because this isn't just some person pulling a groundhog out of a stump. Oh no. It is a full-blown ceremony, a real piece of American pageantry that has its own kind of amazing history.
The first official trip up to Gobbler's Knob happened way back in 1887. And the rules are pretty simple. Phil comes out, and if it's a sunny day, he sees the shadow, gets spooked, and runs back inside. Boom, 6 more weeks of winter. If it's cloudy, there's no shadow, and that means spring is just around the corner. And overseeing this whole production, you've got the guys in the top hats, the inner circle, who, as legend has it, are the only people who can understand Phil's prediction, which he speaks in groundhogese. I know. This whole elaborate setup, though, it really leads us to our first big question.
Why a groundhog? I mean, of all the animals in North America, how did this one specific burrowing rodent land the most famous weather prediction gig on the entire continent? Well, the answer, it turns out, wasn't born in America at all. It came from across the ocean.
And this is where it all starts to click. German immigrants, especially a group we know as the Pennsylvania Dutch, brought this tradition over with them. Back in Germany, the official weather-predicting animal was the badger, or Dachs. They even called the day Dachstag, literally Badger Day. So when they settled in Pennsylvania, they looked around and found a whole lot of groundhogs, but not too many badgers. So they did what any practical group of people would do. They adapted. They just swapped the badger for the local familiar-looking animal.
Okay, so that explains the animal. But what about the date? Why February 2nd? Is it just some random day they picked in the middle of winter? Nope, not at all. The timing is very deliberate, and it's tied to a much older Christian holiday.
That day is Candlemas. It's celebrated on February 2nd, and it's a festival for blessing all the candles a church would need for the whole year. But for centuries, all across Europe, it was also a day when regular people would just look to the skies for a clue. It was kind of like an unofficial community forecast, a moment for everyone to get together and wonder, how much longer is this cold gonna last?
And this wasn't just some vague feeling people had. Get this, here's an English proverb from 1678. That is over 200 years before the first official Groundhog Day. And just listen to the logic here. If Candlemas Day be fair and bright, a sunny day which means a shadow, winter will have another flight, more winter. If on Candlemas Day it be shower and rain, a cloudy day, no shadow, winter is gone and will not come again. The fundamental rule of our modern tradition was already there, firmly in place in Europe, centuries before Punxsutawney Phil was even a twinkle in his great-great-grandfather's eye.
But you know what? We can go even deeper. Why was Candlemas the day for weather predictions in the first place? Why that specific date? To find the real true origin, we have to travel back even further, before Christianity, all the way to the Celtic world.
You see, in the ancient Celtic calendar, the year wasn't just marked by solstices and equinoxes. The midpoints between them, these cross-quarter days, were hugely important. For people who lived by farming, these were the days that marked the real turning points of the seasons. And look right there, on February 1st, sitting perfectly between the winter solstice and the spring equinox, you'll find a festival called Imbolc.
Imbolc was the festival that celebrated the very first hints of spring. The name itself is connected to the lambing season, to the flow of ewe's milk, a critical sign of new life and new food after a long, hard winter. It was dedicated to the goddess Brigid, a protector of new life. And, crucially, it was a festival of light. People would use fires and candles to celebrate the sun's growing strength, its return from the darkness. Sound familiar? Those symbolic candles of Imbolc eventually became the blessed candles of Candlemas.
So let's just trace this incredible journey for a second. It starts with an ancient Celtic festival, Imbolc, a celebration of the first stirrings of spring. Then, as Christianity spreads across Europe, that date gets absorbed and becomes St. Bridget's Day and Candlemas. Centuries later, German folklore links this exact same date with the behavior of a hibernating animal, the badger. And finally, that tradition travels across the Atlantic to America, where the badger gets subbed out for the groundhog, giving us the wonderful, quirky ceremony we know today.
What's so amazing about all this is that this desire, this need to look to an animal coming out of hibernation as a sign of spring, it's not just a German thing or an American thing, it's a deeply human urge. It's a story we've been telling ourselves in different ways in cultures all over the world.
I mean, just look at this global council of forecasters. We've talked about the German badger and its American cousin, the groundhog, but in Romania, people would traditionally watch for a bear to come out of its den for signs of spring. In Irish folklore, it was the hedgehog's behavior on St. Bridget's Day that was supposed to predict the weather. It really seems like for any society living close to the land, seeing these hibernating animals wake up was this powerful, universal symbol of nature's turning wheel, a real, tangible promise that warmth and life were finally on their way back.
Which brings us all the way back to the beginning. We know Phil's predictions aren't scientifically accurate. But after seeing this incredible history, from ancient Imbolc all the way to modern Gobbler's Knob, maybe we can see that accuracy was never really the point. Maybe the real point is just people gathering together on a cold winter day, sharing a hope for spring, and celebrating a tradition that connects us, through thousands of years of history, to our ancestors' deep and vital relationship with the changing of the seasons. What do you think?